Good evening, everybody. It's Rob Clarkson. On our time to get started. I know a few people might be still filtering in. So just a couple of kind of, while people are still walking in and stuff like that, a couple of pieces just to be aware of about kind of tonight. Number one is I do record these, so for any reason you can't come to one of these, or if you want to, like, your child wants, you think, hey, maybe my kid should watch some of this, they can always pull it up on YouTube. It'll be available immediately after I push the button to stop. And all I have to do, and they can actually fast forward through some of it. So, like, if there are pieces that are, like, not super useful to anything, you can highlight a few pieces that might, they might want to bookmark it and kind of follow up with. But that being said, I always like to inform people that I'm recording. So if you ask questions, they will be online. Or if you, like, boo or hiss or something like that, that will also be online forever. So just be aware of that. And then I will also share the presentation as well after this. It'll be available on the counseling website, which we'll look at a little bit today. All right. I also have a parking lot up here. I haven't done this before, but I'm going to try it. If for some reason we're on a certain topic and you're like, oh man, we just got done like 5 minutes ago talking about this and I have a big question I want to try to answer. Sometimes it kind of goes against the flow, so if you guys, sometimes it takes a little bravery. There's a pen right here. If you guys have a big burning question that you feel like we want to address at some point, but maybe it doesn't fit with kind of where we're talking, feel free to walk on up and just write down like financial aid or that thing you said about UC applications with this. Okay, just something that will help us. We can come back to it later. Okay. So tonight I want to do a couple things with us, and so we used to do this twice. So we used to do this 2 separate events: senior information, college information. And what I figured is they are pretty similar. Okay, there's a lot of crossover between senior information and college information. And by college, I'm going to classify what I mean by college. Okay, college, and when we say everyone should have the opportunity to go to college, doesn't necessarily mean a 4-year college, doesn't mean a junior college. What it really means is everyone should have the opportunity, if they wish, to do one of those options. But everybody should go on to some sort of post-secondary training, education, something to improve themselves after they graduate from North Tahoe High School. Okay, this should not be the end of learning for our students. Sometimes that gets misconstrued of that we only want students to go to college. We think it's a great option for a lot of students, but we by no means think it's an option for every single student. There are many different paths which we'll look at a little bit tonight. I'm going to start us off with a little bit more general senior stuff that I've noticed over my time working with a lot of seniors. How many of you guys, just by a show of hands, have already had a senior? Okay. Those of you guys without your hands up, look around and make friends, okay, because they're going to be helpful. Okay, as much as it's very good that you're here. Things have changed many times since you've had a senior probably, but it's very good for you to make connections. Okay, you guys are going to be going through the ups and downs of senior year together. Okay, and there are ups and there will be downs. Okay, so making that network group is really important. And if those of you guys that are somewhat of a veteran of this senior year process, share some of your wisdom and your experience. What did you see before? What are things that they can look out for if they haven't had a senior yet? Okay, and we'll do some of those things tonight. We'll start a little bit with some tips and tricks of how to navigate senior year successfully. Okay, because it is all about navigation. It's all about managing that time. All right, we're going to talk about some important dates and deadlines. We'll talk about some resources, and then we'll kind of transition into the big kind of question about college. And that part of college, when I say that college, that is a little bit more focused on kind of generally the 4-year college. And the reason why we spend so much time on that is because it's a very complicated process that lasts all year. Okay? Where some of these other avenues that students might pursue, it's a little bit more condensed, and really kind of each little kind of post-secondary option needs a little bit finessing in different ways. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily always blend together. So this one, the reason we cover it so quickly is because it starts so quickly. All right? So here's a year at a glance, and I'm going to walk through this a little bit, and I apologize it's a little small. Okay, so here's our 2019-2020 year. All right, we started way back, well, not too much longer ago. Usually it's a little bit earlier. Okay, first thing that comes up, and this might be old hat for you guys, but I'll remind you, the first thing that really comes up is your add drop deadline. Okay, so seniors, you guys have had this for multiple years, but just a reminder that if you guys are not happy with something in your schedule, the 13th is coming up quick. That's next Friday. All right, so we need to make any changes by then. This is particularly important because many of you guys, when we talk about timelines for college, you might be applying for schools in the next month, 2 months, okay, and you need to have some ideas of what courses you're going to take, okay, and that includes spring term. Some of you guys have asked about like Sierra College in the spring, and I always say it's a little bit risky because we don't know what their schedule looks like, and if you are planning on it and you put out an application, you don't end up doing it, you got to go correct all those things, and it could change decisions if you don't follow through. Okay, so that's about classes and stuff like that. Kind of the next kind of green flag over is the FAFSA. And we're actually not going to spend a ton of time this evening. I will talk about a few key points about financial aid, but financial aid encompasses a whole nother event. Okay? It's too much to try to cover it this evening, so we're going to actually spend an hour or so in a couple weeks, and I'll find the date and I'll write it up on the board before we're finished. I have to look it up. Where we'll sit down, similar time, talking all about financial aid. Okay, but just a couple key things to keep in mind. The FAFSA is a free application for federal student aid. That's for students who have social security numbers, who are citizens. There's also an application in the state of California called the California DREAM Act. Okay, and that's for students if you're not a U.S. citizen or you have some different immigration status. Okay, both can qualify you for financial aid. The FAFSA is the government's way of saying you might need some additional funds to go pay for school. And I'll tell you, most people do. Okay? The biggest thing that I would advise you, and the main thing that we'll kind of harp on tonight about financial aid, is do it. Okay? You could be worth $10 billion, you should still do the FAFSA. Okay? Because why spend money when you don't need to? Okay? Bill Gates, all these guys would probably say, what's the best way to make money is to keep it, right? And not spend it wastefully. So the FAFSA opens on October 1st of this year, okay? And it's going to go and it ends in March. State of California is what's called the first submit state, meaning you want to try to submit it as soon as possible, but there's a priority deadline in March, where you lose things like Cal Grant, you lose other things that we'll talk about at that other financial aid night, all right? And we'll kind of come down here when we get down there. The first two kind of major pieces on this timeline. Your academic performance, your first semester will go from on Tuesday this week until January 24th, 2020. That is your first big grading window. Okay? Most people will say junior year is my most important year in the world of college. Okay? It's important, but they also say senior year doesn't really matter that much. That is absolutely false. Senior year almost matters more because it's like a ghost year. When you apply to schools, they see what classes you're going to take, but they don't know how you do in them. Okay, so when you apply, they're expecting you to maintain the same level of performance. Or even better if you're kind of a little bit lower to start with, and they want to see upward trends. Okay, so they will see those, and we'll talk about how that works. Okay, in the next 2 months or so, you'll be getting some information from me. This is for whether or not you're going to four-year college or anybody. We're going to be meeting with every single senior and a parent or guardian. Okay, and we're going to have what's called your post-secondary plan meeting. Okay, similar to our ILP meetings that we had last year, where we kind of started this kind of thought process. This is where we're going to get down and do some more concrete work. Okay, I'm going to ask some very hard questions like, okay, so what is your application list if you're applying to a four-year college? Okay, you want to go to trade school. What have you learned? Okay, when is your first deadline? Have you talked to anybody about this? And really, seniors that are in here, this is your opportunity to share what your plans are so we can kind of brainstorm and ensure that your senior year is set up so that you're successful to reach that next step. Okay, so in about a week, we're going to give it about a week and a half. You'll get another email from me with an invitation to set up that appointment. Okay, it's going to be all online. Translation services will be available too. Those will be called home. But that's going to be open until we're done, basically. But the goal would be finishing before Thanksgiving. If you guys want to sit over here, we can get some more chairs. We can sit in this fancy one. Sure. Comfy. So that's called your post-secondary planning meeting. Okay, and so that's just something to be aware of. That's a really good conversation. But I do want you to be a little bit prepared for it. Okay, as we go down, we'll talk about a few of these other items a little later. There's some questions about college application windows. Generally, October, November are within those kind of typical timeframes, especially for our state institutions. But basically, if I was to break down your senior year, especially for that college process, but for most other things too. Roughly up until the end of October, you're still kind of within the planning, kind of rolling into the doing phase. Okay? Most things aren't going to necessarily be like, you can't click submit for many things much earlier than, say, the beginning of October for a lot of circumstances. Okay? But usually you're going to have to submit by end of November, early December, even January. Okay, so that kind of early winter time frame is the magic. Everything needs to be kind of packaged, bow on it, ready to submit. Okay? Parents, it also means getting your credit card out. Okay, because it's going to cost money to do a lot of these things, so making sure that that is all set up, is ready to go.
Are you going to give us those exact dates tonight? Like,
we'll go through a few of them. Yep.
CSU dates.
Yep. And then the biggest piece where people actually screw up is not in those first two windows. The planning, students can maybe mess up by not planning early enough or over planning potentially. Okay. The doing is as long as you can read and follow directions. Big tip number one. Okay, it's relatively straightforward for the most part. The biggest area where we see students actually mess up in this process is in the follow-through. Okay, it's okay, so you submitted, now what? Or you've been admitted, now what? And really keeping up with everything that they've been asked to do by the colleges, because it's no longer coming through us, it's no longer coming through you, it's coming straight to the students responsibility to keep track of everything and follow through. And that's challenging. How many emails do you guys have in your inbox? Probably a scary amount. Okay, so that's something you might want to think about working on, because you don't want to have to filter through 14,000 emails, which I have seen before. I've seen teachers with 15,000 emails. So I mean, it's something to just be aware of. These are like what's that? Oh, sorry. Just let me know if that happens. It likes to fall asleep. I almost brought my flashlight up here just in case. Okay. So that's just a big thing. So here's kind of, to give you an idea of what the life cycle of a high school looks like. Okay? Over here we have effort and undertaking. Okay? Down here we have time. So in ninth grade, they come in and they might not be taking on tons and tons of stuff. It's a pretty standard start to ninth grade. Okay? Usually most ninth graders start out pretty excited, relatively excited about school, ready to start something new. Okay? 10th grade comes around. A lot of students might take a little bit, they maybe challenge themselves with an honors class or an AP class or something like that. Okay? But relatively pretty tame. We get to junior year, and this is what we find happening most often. Okay? That effort and undertaking generally goes up. Okay? Students, like I said earlier, think junior year, most important year. So they're going to take as many things as they can to help boost their state college prospects or the resume or whatever it might be. And they tend to work a little bit harder. They go through maturation. 10th through 11th grade, it's like something clicks in most students' heads. And it's like, oh, I figured it out. I'm actually going to graduate. So let's get down to business. And it's kind of this amazing thing. But they tend to do this. And this actually, we've noticed that this is actually starting to cause some problems. Okay, students are actually taking on too much potential in their junior year. And we've actually, as a school, kind of started to say, hey, whoa, that might be a lot for you to undertake. Okay, and let's think about the other things that maybe you could be doing at this time, than maybe taking 6 or 7 AP classes and an outside online course and independent study PE, plus playing 3 sports, and all these other things that you might be wanting to do. All great, but so are other things, and colleges value all of those. Okay, so that's kind of what we see. The problem is, senior year, it usually goes like this. Right? Seniors, think about your schedule. Who's got, don't raise your hand, that's embarrassing. Think about your schedule. Who's got like 2 unscheduled periods and maybe nothing in those places? Maybe nobody here, but it's not uncommon. Senior year, people think hit cruise control a little bit. We're going to take it lighter. Junior year was my big kind of ramp it up. Okay, now I'm going to back it off a little bit, which is arguably, same thing we said is important. However, when they go here and then go here, colleges tend to notice. Okay, again, they're looking at trends, and we'll talk a little about that in a minute. Okay, but the biggest problem, okay, and the biggest piece of advice that I can give you tonight, whether or not you're going to college or anything else, the biggest piece of advice is this. So guess when this happens? Spring. Right? Who's had senior friends or seniors have seen this? So this is actually a real phenomenon. It's called senioritis. Okay, and it actually is a diagnosable fake disease. Okay, so, but I mean, if it was in DSM, I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, it could be a legitimate thing, and it is not something to take lightly. Students who have a 1.0 get senioritis. Students who have a 4.5 get senioritis. Okay, it is a universal thing for most seniors, and it usually happens after finals in the first. Okay, and usually when the snow starts to melt for most people, people get a little bit of an itch to be outside on the beach. They want to go and do things. Okay, they start doing some of those senior graduation type events. Okay, and everything kind of schoolwork and that follow through piece. Kind of like, oh, I'll do that, but it's not my first priority. Okay, so parents, it's important for you to be aware because you're going to notice these things, and when you do, it's much easier to nip in the bud early on in the process than after they're full blown kind of like having an episode. Okay, so just be aware. So like I mentioned, we have a myriad of different options available for students, and these are by no means all encompassing. These are a few of the most common options that students at Nortel High School and students in our district all pursue. Okay, in our school, and I would say in our district, the vast majority of why we spend so much time on it is because the vast majority of students do go on to typically either four-year college or community college. Okay, that's generally, about 75% of students or so matriculate on there after graduating high school. However, there are another number of other options. You have trade and voc schools. So some examples of that would be like Wyotech, UTI, the University Technical Institute, wants to become mechanics. The culinary school. There's different chef schools. I'm blanking right now. Heading into the military, that's actually been one that's increased over the last couple of years. Students have enlisted or pursued like ROTC or things like that. Heading straight to a career, finding a great career, okay, right off the bat. Or even gap years. Gap years are something that we see pretty commonly here, primarily because of some of our athletics. Okay, we have a large number of skiers who are pretty competitive. Some of them might take a gap year to become more competitive or maybe be recruited by a college or pursue high-level competitions on their circuit. Okay, so a gap year is something, we're not going to spend a lot of time tonight talking about gap years. If you want to talk a little about gap year, if that's something you're thinking about, there are definite pros and cons. Okay, so I want to, they're great, but you got to have a purpose. Okay, that's the biggest thing. So know what your goal is for a gap year, because there are some downfalls as well. So some tips for making this year a great year. Okay, number one, and the biggest and best thing is to take advantage of all your opportunities. And this kind of goes back to some of our schedule is actually dictated by seniors. Because so many of our seniors and our skiers want 5th and 6th period off. That requires certain classes to be in certain places, which dictates and basically manipulates our schedule so that it ends up a certain way. Okay? So seniors, take advantage of all the free education that you have access to right now. Whether that's here, whether that's on Duolingo and you want to go learn a new language for fun, whether that's, getting educated in the community and volunteering. Okay, those are free opportunities that you don't see very often once you leave high school. Okay, so that's something I want you to be super aware of. Try new things. Okay, those are going to be things that, this is your soft place to land. College kind of is an extension of that. It's a little more risky for students sometimes. But here you can try new things. If you want to start a club, do it. If you want to do things, it's not too late. Some people are like, well, it won't really matter on my college application if I only did it for a year. Who cares? Do it anyways. It's all about developing you as a person. And so that's the piece that I would encourage seniors to do is explore new things and try something different for your last year of high school. We talked about senioritis, but that's big. Okay, parents, that does not mean get on Aries every night and nag them and nag them and nag them. Again, part of our challenge as adults trying to raise teenagers is we have to let them go while still guiding them. Okay, and so kind of our motto here is we're going to try to be on top of the 9th graders, and then every year we start to be a little bit less kind of in their business about what they're doing. Okay, and so by senior year they should have a little bit more autonomy. So let them have it, and but be smart about it. Okay, maybe don't let them fail their English class, but let them struggle a little bit and figure it out. Okay, that might be, you want to judge those consequences. Give thanks. We're going to talk a little bit about letters of recommendation and stuff. A big thing that is a great life skill to learn. but also important for seniors, is being able to eloquently and appropriately give thanks to people that you're thankful to. Okay, and that's something that a lot of times we don't see, unfortunately, in schools or outside in the society. Okay, and that's something I want to try to really focus on a little bit this year with our seniors, is really working on what does it mean to give thanks. Like have you ever written a thank you note or an email, or walked up to someone and just said a sincere thank you? Like, so thinking about those things as opportunities, because a lot of people here, a lot of people outside the community, and a lot of people sitting in this room have spent hours, days, or years helping the student get to where they are. Okay, and so, you know, the kind of the saying of kind of thanks go a million miles is really true. We're never gonna own a yacht working in education. But I guarantee you, if you ask every one of the teachers, they're gonna say I would trade it for all the thank yous I get and the people coming back. So think about that when you're walking through these halls this senior year, and also give thanks to your fellow classmates. Okay, the people who came before you and also the people who are behind you. Okay, we talked about the FAFSA apply firm. That's the biggest tip. Apply for financial aid. Just do it, and don't wait till the end. We'll go over the time frames, but that is a big thing. We have pretty soft deadlines at North Tahoe High School. Okay, most of the time it's on purpose. We know people push the deadlines, or something comes up unintentionally, and we usually add maybe a cushion day or two, knowing that that stuff happens. That does not happen in the world of college applications, or the world of most other things. Job applications that is due, is due. If it says 11:59 p.m., you better be asking East Coast or West Coast time, because that's a real question. It depends on where the server's at. So you need to know that. And sometimes it'll specify, other times it's not, and I would, if you're gonna push it, I would definitely make sure. Okay.
Are they gonna have time in any of their classes for working on applications? Because that's the rumor I heard, like in the past, that they had some time or
Depends
some
on-
guidance here, or
Depends
are
on
they
classes.
expected to do it all at home?
A good portion will be at home. It depends on your classes, so it depends on what courses you're taking. I know English, if you're in English, tends to spend quite a bit of time. We have a new, actually, college and career class. Ms. Barker's here who's teaching that. That's in our 6th period.
If you're a senior who doesn't have a 6th period, they can consider.
It's actually getting full, so
Oh,
might
but
not have.
not.
it's not completely full, but
They can't do like drop-in?
Definitely, I mean, we'll have college visits and stuff, and if they don't have a 6, or they
So,
look
yeah.
at what their 6th period teacher, and they wanna come to the college visit, or they need help, of course they can reach out. And that's something that they would just have to coordinate with me. But yeah, that class is designed for practical application and getting our kids the aid they need.
Essay writing, like, would you
They're
read
doing that in some of
essays?
their English classes.
Okay.
so yeah, so once the year gets going, I also during RTI will do drop-in sessions, so we'll be doing stuff like, you know, a 45-minute session on the UC application, on the CSU, Common App, essay writing, things like that. And then also like the adults here, I know Ms. Lefevers does a lot of reviewing essays, I review essays. So really all it takes is asking. Okay, and that's the biggest thing. But I know that in different ways there will be time around and during school time to work on these things, but you should expect to spend quite a bit of time outside of school as well.
But,
I'm sorry.
who could I tell my daughter specifically that she could give an essay to review? So I could say.
She can ask.
She can ask.
She can ask anybody.
Well,
I'm happy to review any essay. I just ask for about 2 weeks of time to kind of review and get things back depending on the window. I know Ms. Lefevers reviews quite a few. I would, you know, if you're looking for like an English person to like review grammar and all that good stuff, the English department teachers would be my first place to go. I'm not gonna check your grammar when I read things. I use spell check too. I will read things like I'm a college admissions officer. I remove myself from knowing you. I'm gonna say, hey, what does this mean? Like, you took the whole essay to answer the question. Do you think the reader will actually get through the whole essay? Or will they stop after a paragraph because they ran out of time and they didn't get the answer they're looking for? Okay, so I'm gonna ask some of the hard questions about more content and kind of like strategy than kind of like the rhetorical pieces, where your teachers might be a better option. So typically students should have a relationship somewhat with the teacher. That's helpful. But you can ask anybody, and I would venture to guess that most people would say yes.
do you have any books you recommend on writing good college essays?
Not necessarily off the top of my head. Books are kind of, a little bit old. How many seniors have ever opened the book to look at colleges? not many. Websites are typically where you go.
For me to read, so then.
So we'll have a couple of resources at the end that I'll share, and then that might be, feel free to shoot me an email, I can send you a few links. I'll show you where to find a couple of the resources on the website too. Okay. So let's talk a little about, so that giving thanks piece goes into our senior, sorry, Roxy.
How many colleges would you recommend applying to?
We'll get there as well. If I don't mention it, remind me. We'll get there when we start talking about colleges a little bit. The answer is it depends, but we'll talk about why. So part of this process, and this is something that seniors, whether or not, again, you're going to college or not, okay, is probably an important process to do, because when we get to the spring, most of our scholarships, people like free money, okay? And if students apply at North Tahoe High School for some of the scholarships that we offer, especially within our local community, I would venture to guess that almost every student will get money. That might not be $50,000, might be $1,000, but again, you do not want to throw away the free money. And if you spend 2 hours writing an essay and filling out an application, $500 an hour is pretty dang good. Okay, they won't make that anywhere else. Okay, but part of that process often requires recommendations. Typically, you'll see recommendations for college applications on two primary areas. One would be the comment application, which now has about 871 different schools around the country and around the world as part of that application itself. And then for potentially outside of school universities, but also scholarship applications will oftentimes require recommendation letters. Typically, it's going to require a letter from me. Okay, so I write almost every single student, especially if you're applying Common App. Common App requires one from me as the counselor. And then typically at least one educator in most cases. Okay? And then it'll oftentimes maybe have 2 or 3 other optional ones that you can add teachers, you can add a coach. Generally no family members, parents, grandparents. They don't really trust family opinions. They all know they love you. But that's going to be a big piece. And part of that process is filling out this senior profile. Okay? And seniors, you have this on your Google Drive for your classroom or your Pathways class. And I've sent it out a couple times, and when I pull up the website, I'll show you where you can find it. However, when you look at it, you might freak out. I'll get you in a sec. Because it's somewhat lengthy. All right, we ask you to reflect on a lot of things and really provide us some decent information. Okay, the reason why we use this, we're going to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours kind of writing your recommendation letter. Okay, we really want to encapsulate everything we can about you. Okay, we might not necessarily want to talk about that one time you came in and made a schedule change. Okay, so we want to get some things that maybe we don't know about you outside of school. Maybe we didn't know you were like the National Spelling Bee competition winner. Okay, but unless you tell us, we might not be aware. We can't mention it. Okay, it's not maybe something that we're going to make the focus of our writing, but it's kind of like, hey, here's another cool thing about this student maybe you didn't know. Okay, these things ask questions that help us fill that in correctly. All right, most people look at it and go like, oh my gosh, Reem, that's long. Someone told me they spent like 6 hours on it. I'm like, don't spend 6 hours. We're not looking for like 3-paragraph essay responses for each of these questions. Bullet points are great. Okay, lists are great. If you have a resume, I know most juniors built a resume already that lists some of these things. Attach it. This is not designed to be extra work. This is designed to help us help you. Okay, so I require one to write you a letter. Most of your teachers will as well. But again, it doesn't have to be a memoir. It can be short and sweet, to the point. Okay, I have a couple of these here. Feel free to get them up there on Google Drive. You can type into them. Usually it's much easier to read. Okay, for us. Okay, so that's all good information for the senior profile. We'll talk a little about that in a second. So let's explore some resources where you can find some of these things. I'm going to try to pull up our website because it's easier for me to show you. Okay. So, how many of you guys have written? Most of you guys probably have been to our website, maybe to book an appointment, find some information. Awesome. Okay. This is our go-to place for a lot of information. I put some time into this website because I want it to be valuable. Okay. It also helps me be more effective with our students. I have 350 something students on my caseload. Okay. Not all of them are seniors. All right. So the more time I have by addressing a question maybe with a resource or giving you a little bit of an assignment and providing some direction, allows me to spend twice that time with students who maybe need some, or you potentially who maybe has a more in-depth question that needs some more looking at. Okay, so again, you can find information about booking an appointment. One note, October 26th is going to be our annual college admissions case study. Okay, it's before most of your applications are due, so if you want to sign up, the registration link is there, and it might sell out. It's free to register, but
Can you explain a little bit more what that is?
so that's where you get the flip side of the college application process. So you're going to actually review a bunch of fake applications with college representatives leading you as a group, and then you as a group make a decision of whether they're admitted or not. So you get to see what happens after they hit submit. It's really informative. Okay, and that's why we do it every single year, because it's super, super helpful to see how that works. So there's a couple areas I want to just direct our attention to so you can know where to find a few of these things I'm mentioning. Okay, a lot of the frequently kind of access things are up here in this quick links menu. Okay, so if you're interested in, hey, there's a school profile. I'm interested in learning a little more, like what goes with my application, or how can I talk about my school a little bit more? There's information there. Okay, I need a transcript. Okay, there's information about ordering transcripts there. That's something you typically will need a little bit later on in your senior year. Okay, information about booking that post-secondary planning meeting is right there. Okay, information on financial aid, accessing Naviance. But then over here, there's some different areas. School counseling has 3 domains: academic, social, emotional, college and career. Okay, for kind of what we're talking about right now, most of that's going to be in the college and career. So if you went up there, you can learn information about some process. There's handbooks that I've either created or have access from colleagues that have a lot of really detailed resources available to you, as well as financial aid information. So links to the FAFSA, different scholarships that come out. Okay, so these are all things that I would encourage you to check out. The other piece too is, like I said, if you ever don't make a meeting, or you want to revisit anything or share with your kids, if you scroll down, there's a link there for YouTube somewhere. This is not the easiest device to use. But if you click here, it'll take you to the YouTube page so you can watch all the recordings. Naviance will be used quite a bit in senior year. And then if you scroll down, there's some additional links. Okay. So those are all some really great places within our website that we already have resources available for you. Okay, those are both for parents and students. Let me hop back over here. Let's see. Okay, so I mentioned that myriad of options. There's a lot of different things out there for people. Okay, and I do want to make particular note. Okay, how many of you guys have seen something similar to this before? Like a breakdown of education and job security and training and all this other stuff. Okay, pretty common thing to put up there. Okay, and it's technically pretty accurate. Okay, as you typically gain more education, typically, unless you go get like a PhD in history or philosophy or something like that, you're going to generally have a higher earning potential. Okay. You will also have a higher bill to pay to get to that degree, typically. Okay, so there's a trade-off. And generally, you're going to have a lower unemployment rate. Okay, pretty common thrown around data set. Okay, and accurate. Okay, but it's not necessarily the whole picture. They leave out a big section of industry that's growing and in demand. Okay, so there are a lot of skilled trades and technical work that are out there, again, that fall underneath this world of college. Okay, that I can't fix my toilet. I'm going to pay someone a lot of money to come fix my toilet because I don't know how to. Okay, or an electrician, or a welder. Geez, a welder makes like 3 times as much as I make. Okay, and generally can get through into that profession very quickly. Okay, so I do not want to discount that training, education, career technical education, all these things are viable and valuable options for students that do not require a college degree. Okay, but they do require training. All right, and that's kind of our motto. It's college should be for all students. Every student should have the opportunity. Why do we push the A through G? Why do we push all these classes and encourage students to try to meet them? We want them to have a choice, but that doesn't mean they need to choose that as an option. Okay? But all of it is knowing what your goals are. All right? At your post-secondary planning meeting, students, I'll probably ask you, what might you major in? Sometimes people will say, I want to be an engineer. I want to be a psychologist. I want to be a nurse. Very common one. Okay. Engineering, nurses, and teachers. 3 most common things that people say when they come into my office as a career. Okay? Many times because they have one of those in their family. All right? So then my next question is often, why? And then it gets really quiet because nobody knows. Okay, and that's kind of a scary place, both for me and maybe you as a parent, and it definitely should be maybe for you as a kid. And it's a hard question. It's a really hard question because you might not be exposed. You might not know what engineering looks like, or you might not know exactly what nursing looks like, apart from watching Grey's Anatomy or something like that. Okay, those things are valuable tools of exploration, like seeing what that might be and being like, yeah, I could maybe do that. Okay, but it's not necessarily what's your end goal. The why question is more about what pieces of that job might interest me. Okay, what might I want to do after I graduate that fulfills me as a person? Okay? And that sometimes it takes more thought about it than just like engineering sounds cool, I like math and science. Okay? I did too. I studied aerospace engineering for 2 years, and it sucked. Okay, for me. I was not good at it, and it was not good for me. I took a lot of calculus and a lot of physics, and we did not match. Okay? In reality, what I probably wanted to be was probably a graphic designer. I wanted to make the airplanes look cool, not fly. It's a very important difference. Okay? So those things are things that I want you to think about because while I found something that I really enjoy doing, okay, it took me a different path to get there than maybe what other counselors might have had. I took 2 years of school and then had to go to a whole different school, change majors to being a teacher degree, and get my master's, and it took me a little bit longer and probably cost me some more money. Okay, so if I had thought about it a little bit differently, I may have taken a different approach. Okay, so just think about the whys. The big thing too is that success, that word success, different for everybody, everyone has a different idea. There's a book out there called Who You Are Is Not Where You Go by Frank Brunati. He's a New York Times best-selling author, columnist, and kind of in a nutshell what he says, he went through and looked at about 500 kind of what people would call highly successful politicians, CEOs, Fortune 500 companies, all these things that are like people who are well respected, I would say, and also probably make quite a good paycheck. He went through and analyzed and said, okay, where did you go to school? Where did you go to school? What did you do when you grew up? Okay? And what he found was the vast majority of what successful people look like are not necessarily what we would maybe attribute to successful schools, okay, or successful programs. Okay? They went to state college instead of an Ivy League. Not to say Ivy League is not for somebody, it's a great option and they are great schools. But I think there's a perception that success equals this. Okay? And it's not so much what you do in a particular program, college, or degree, but it's about how you do it, what you learn, the knowledge and innovation that you take away with you. So it's more about the process than the outcome. Okay? And that's what his book kind of covers. I just saved you like 300 pages. Okay, so you're welcome. But if you want to look it up, it's a great book on Amazon. Okay? So that 4-year college is very long and complex. Now we're going to dive more into that kind of specifically. And so when we apply to college, there's a couple norms I like to set forth for parents and students because sometimes when we talk about college, it starts to get in the weeds for everybody. And sometimes I feel like I'm like the fly on the wall at my office and you guys are like, I don't want this and I want this. And I'm like, okay, like let's try to work something out. So parents, this is for you. Okay? The first thing is please let go. Again, we're trying to have students become that adult. We're going to ask them to do a lot of things that require responsibility, follow through. Okay? And our job is really to kind of be the encourager. Okay? We're going to keep an eye on it, but we're not going to step in and do. Okay? And that is a common thing. Varsity Blues. I mean, parents stepped in a big way and got in big trouble for it by cheating. Okay? And I know that none of our students and parents do that here, but it is a big thing. Okay? And people are going to be hyper vigilant for that because of that media. Okay? Separate nuts and bolts from emotion. In this process, you're going to have, again, those highs and lows. You're going to get in arguments, you're going to cry, you're going to have, high five or hug or whatever you guys do. Okay? Separate those things a little bit. Okay? Don't have a conversation about like, when's the due date? All right, let's talk about finances, all this stuff when you're emotional about something. It does not go well. All right? One thing that I suggest is calendaring. Mom or dads, take your daughter or son out on a date or a outing or an adventure. Okay, go get coffee, go get ice cream, go play mini golf, whatever it might be. Okay, talk about, like, set purposeful time aside to talk about it so that you both know and no one's ambushed. Okay, because I know ambushing happens, it happened to me. Okay, and I know it happens to people where you walk in like, hey, let's talk about your college application. You're like, Dad, I just had 3 tests, I lost my football game, and I'm not happy. Okay, and that's not a fun place to be in. Okay, again, support but not do, and then plan. Oops. Students, again, consider college in light of your vocation, not the name of the school. Okay, what are you going to get by going to school, not how are you going to get where you're going by going to this school. Okay, stay organized. A calendar is a great starting place. If you do not use a calendar, please start doing that this year. Okay, it could be digital, it could be on a piece of paper, it could be on your phone. That's going to be your life and death to make sure things happen on time. Okay, because again, 11:59 p.m., it's not in, you're out. Apply broadly, but limit applications to a reasonable number. I think, here's where your answers to this question is. Okay? Like I said, it depends, and there's no hard and fast rule about how many schools should I apply to. The right answer is however many you think is appropriate for you. However, this is a pretty common kind of formula, I would say, that a lot of college professionals would advise is maybe a decent idea. Okay? 2 reach schools. Okay, reach, all these words are in quotes because there's not really, other people will call it like red, yellow, green, or like some other names, but they are going to be schools. They don't have to be hard schools to get into. Okay, but again, we're talking about like statistics here. Okay, if you apply to all schools that have a 4% admissions rate, what is your chance of getting in? Not very good. Okay, so you have to be realistic about the statistics. You might be our top student, but it still means if that's that low, everybody applying is a top student. Okay, so you do not want your whole application list to be made up of those schools because it's going to make for a tough spring potentially. Okay, but they all should be pretty good schools. So 2 to 4 are kind of your target range, and this is both your stats. Okay, so like test scores, GPA, finances. Looking at how much it's going to cost you. You need to have some of this information in target reach. Maybe a financial reach might be part of that. Okay, you're going to fit that profile of a generally admitted students. This is where Navion's College Board, that kind of stuff can be very useful to collect information about these schools. And then quote unquote safety schools. I hate the word safety, but that's the one we're going with. No school is considered safe. Okay, you can have I've had some of our top students denied from schools, and some of our students who would be considered lower performing or lower, maybe lower GPA, get in. Okay, so there is not a equation for getting into schools or not getting into schools. People are surprised every single year. Yeah.
Will you work with students looking at their list of colleges they want to apply to and help them determine which are reach, target, and safety schools?
Of course. So most of that, so that will happen. We'll do some of that at your post-secondary plan meeting if your list is ready. So that's a great time to do some of that conversation. Again, but most of my fall is devoted to you guys. Okay, the vast majority of my time, with the exception of like these first 2 weeks primarily when I'm like crazy with green forms, is for seniors because this is your big crunch time. Okay, which is sometimes a little bit frustrating for everyone, including myself, because sometimes like 10th graders sometimes get the bottom of the barrel, and that's kind of annoying for me too. But it's you have to kind of set priorities, and they're on their way out, and we gotta get a lot of stuff done with seniors. So that's kind of how it ends up. But we do our very best. But yes, to answer the question, I will whenever you like. Okay. I might not be able to exactly classify, but we can look for all the data that shows where it might end up. Now, if you guys had 20 schools on your list, am I not going to meet with you? No way. Like, I will meet with you. You can have 20, 50 schools. There's people out there that are crazy and apply to like 200 schools. And really, they're just trying to brag, to be honest. There's no purpose of applying to 50 schools. They just want to say I applied to 50 schools and I got into 40 of them. Okay, that you'll see them on the news. The news does a poor job of portraying college admissions and reality. Okay, the other thing that the news does poorly is essays. Okay, we're not going to harp on essays quite a bit today. We'll use that kind of generally with the students a little later in the process. But they'll say like, this student got into all of the Ivy League schools with this essay about Costco or something like that. And they'll maybe like show you the essay. You read it like, that's a pretty good essay. And then next year, guess how many Costco essays we see? A lot. Okay? So just be aware. They hype everything, including college admission stuff. Okay? So to try not to follow those trends because it really is what it is. So to kind of, before we get into specifics about CSUs, UCs, all those guys, kind of in the second half, I'm going to try to get us out, just give you guys a time frame, and try to get us out of here if we can by 7, but hopefully a little before, unless we really are having a good conversation and we want to stay. But I know we have a long night. But I want to talk about, so admissions is actually an outdated word. Okay? The formal word of people who work in this industry is called enrollment management. It's very scientific, very like white wall hospital-y. Okay? So, but it's really a good description. And I'm going to talk us through a little about kind of what they call the funnel of enrollment. Okay, and kind of their process, so you can see a little bit about how the admissions officers, enrollment managers kind of work with students. So when we start at the top, we'll kind of work our way down in 2 chunks. Okay? So this first group of students, so they're called suspects. All right? And so this is kind of very much in the very beginning of their process as professionals. This might information comes from PSAT. How many of you guys got like a bunch of junk mail from like in your email inboxes and in the mailbox? Yeah. You probably put the yes, please give my information to the selected search service or whatever they call it on this at PSAT. That is where they get you. They go and buy data sets from College Board, from ACT, and they say, hey, I know that generally our admitted class looks like this. We're going to send out mailers saying, hey, you look like a great student, please apply. To all these students that meet these metrics. Okay? And so that's them kind of like, that's their advertising. They're like, hey, here you go. We're going to take whoever maybe hits this. It might also be like based on location. Okay, so maybe you're living in NorCal and they're trying to boost their enrollment from like Northern California or Nevada or things like that. Okay, so it's generally not very specific information about you. Okay, the thing that's tough, it's a little bit less common in senior year, but you still see it, is oftentimes we'll see heads about this big. Guess what? I'm automatically in. I'm like, sorry, man, that's not really what that letter means. They're kind of, you're part of the marketing chain right now. And they want you to apply. It's not a bad sign, but many times it's kind of like a false sense of like, I'm like an automatic admin if I submit my application here because they emailed me already. Okay, so just know that. Okay? Your prospects generally respond in some manner to their outreach. Or they take steps on their own. Say they sign up for a newsletter. Or, here's a tip, visit the college reps when they're here on campus. Be surprised, most of them stand there like this, kind of looking around. Hey, you want to? No, okay, thanks. Like, they come to learn about you. And that's why they ask you to fill out their cards. That's why they ask you information. Okay, they notice. Okay, college admissions is one of the big brotheriest things out there. They know if you visit their website. They know if you're on your email chain. They know if they follow your Facebook page. It is crazy. Okay, so please do, it is not a bad thing necessarily. If you're interested in that school, you should probably do some of those things. Okay? We'll talk about kind of something called demonstrated interest in a second. So those prospects, the respondents are the people that kind of trigger, they activate to the next level. Okay? They engage, basically. So maybe they aren't just signing up, maybe they make a phone call or shoot an email, or again, chat with someone. The second part is more of the active part of it. Okay, so this is typically going to be kind of in the senior year time frame. Starting maybe in the junior year to senior year. Okay, so your applicants. Okay, these are people who actually start filling out the application. So they start every time it's a funnel because every one of these rings, the pool of people doing this shrinks. This part's important because there's actually a term for someone who actually starts an application. Okay, they call them a stealth applicant. What do you think a stealth applicant is? Stealth applicant is someone who gets all the way through the application and hits submit, and the school has zero record of them. They've never engaged in anything. They're not on any lists. They just they're like, whoa, we weren't expecting, they can really expect you to apply. And they weren't expecting the student, okay? Self-applicants are not necessarily good, okay? Because they want to see there's a process in this world of work. Once people apply, they get throughout filling out all those online forms, then it goes into being admitted. In between these two is, this can be 6 months, it can be a week. Okay, that time frame in between it being applied and being admitted. Talk about the time frames and how the application systems work, but just know that time frame varies depending on the school itself. Okay, once a student has been admitted, okay, then they have to go through and figure out, okay, which of these students is likely to actually enroll? Because their end number, their end game that their jobs rely on in no joke manner, it's called yield. Okay? What yield means is how many students get here. And technically there would be actually one down here, and that would be the first day of school showing up. Okay? Just because you deposit does not mean that you're going to have a butt in a seat at that university. Okay? So they start out pool 10,000 people. They have no room for 10,000 people on their campus. Okay? They do not want 10,000 people to actually apply. But they have to start there, and every step they make, it gets smaller until they get to a number, say 2,000 people deposit. The reason why this is so important is because this is one of the biggest reasons why people get denied. Okay? But it can also be one of the biggest reasons why you get in. Okay? It really does make or break the thing. So this is what makes percentages, there are some other factors that I would say artificially inflate admissions or deflate admission percentages that schools do kind of on the unscrupulous level, but ultimately, if they over-enroll by 500 students, people are getting fired. If they under-enroll by 500 students, people are getting fired. So they have a lot of mathematical steps and data to get to that magic number they're looking for on campus for that freshman class. Okay, so that's kind of what their job is behind, and they use all of those tools, SATs, essays, letters of recommendation, application information, demographics in certain areas, okay, to help them weed out and craft. It's really what they're doing. Think of them like a master clay worker. They are crafting a class of whatever it might be, 20, 24, 25-ish for you guys, okay? And so they are working to do that. They don't want all valedictorians necessarily. They don't want all athletes. They don't want all, socioeconomic status, a certain socioeconomic status or, ethnicity or things like that. They need a diverse group of people in a lot of different ways, okay? So, all the things that are important are set by what's called institutional priorities, okay? The dean, the provost, the big people in charge of the college are going to say, hey, they might say, you know what? We would really like to work on our geomatical engineering program. My brother actually studied that. Surveying on steroids. So we are going to actually boost the number there. We're going to put some particular focus on that, or maybe a more global area. We would really we noticed that our potentially even, and it's questionable whether it's I would say it's a non-admissible decision factor, but it's used in some ways. Like say the gender differences are fairly imbalanced at school. So they might look and say, okay, it's an institutional priority to help become more of an equal playing field for people at our campus. Okay, that sets the enrollment objectives. Who are we going to really focus on? What is going to be most important for us as we're reading these applications? And then finally, all that kind of funnels down into recruitment strategies. What are they doing? What school are they going to? What areas? Who are they going to try to talk to? Okay. Selection strategies. How are we reading? What are the criteria for reading these essays and applications? And then who are we offering the most money to when it's available? Okay. So that all depends on what people find important at that particular college. Okay. So we kind of talked a little about that. Let's get a little more specific. So that's enrollment management. We're going to jump down a little bit deeper level. Yes?
Are you going to talk at all tonight about a student that's interested in athletics and how that plays into the enrollment?
Not necessarily, because it's not super connected.
Okay.
There are some connections.
I do have one question.
Sure.
So my daughter's emailing coaches.
Uh-huh.
Is she going to be a stealth applicant if she connects with the coach? Will the coach talk to the admissions
If
office?
they're
Should
being
she
recruited
also-
by the coach generally, if it's kind of like they'll probably keep an eye on it. Depends on how they enter information and collect
Should she
information.
also be emailing the college, the admissions office? other
Probably
than
because they're not
college?
necessarily always working together.
Okay,
You have to, so like generally if you're like a top recruited athlete, like they're gonna full ride you and like you're a #1 recruit, admissions and athletics can work together, okay? Generally, it's not gonna get you in if you're not necessarily a good applicant right off the bat. It can help, but if you're kind of like, if you're playing the prospect and like throwing your name out there, coaches may or may, it's kind of, who knows how they take that, okay? We'll do some more information on a different time and mostly for students on NCAA stuff if you're interested and, but generally it's not necessarily in the world of admissions, athletics.
So all this information you just gave us about kind of the inside of admissions or whatever
Yeah.
it's called, we don't know what they're looking for, so there's no way to find that information
Correct, and
out,
that's
right?
part of the secret is it's a gray area, there's no magic ticket. And so our job is to know all that information, is to know kind of what the process is, but not necessarily knowing. They don't like go and say like, we want this.
Right.
But knowing that that is part of that process. Sometimes it helps soften a blow of maybe a denial, be like, you know what? It's like, people get denied all the time, they're excellent students. People get in all the time, they're excellent students. And it's not necessarily that I did not do enough myself. I was just not the right fit for this college at this time. And so it can soften that blow a little bit, but it's more for information so you know what the process is. Because what we have control over, and this is why the case study might be a really good experience, because you can actually be a part of looking at applications and see how hard it actually is. I will say, and it might blow the secret, but almost all the last ones, the people who got admitted the most were not the people you would have expected. Okay, and so it's a pretty eye-opening, so that might be a good thing to look at, because then you can see like, even they'll say, here's our priorities, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna look at these, but there's other avenues we need to look at too. Okay, so check that out. So let's talk about types of applications. Like we talked about, common application, big C, big A. They just rebranded. So if you had a senior before, it used to be a big red website, like a lot of red. They're like blue and changed their logo and all that stuff. So it might look different if you've seen it before. That just happened this summer. They've changed a few of kind of like the functionalities of the website, but it's generally all pretty similar. Okay, so not a lot has changed from the past. Didn't update that, where they added some more. About 871 schools. Big C, big A. Okay, it's a formal organization, the common application. There are school-specific applications. The best one I can give you an example of that students might be aware of is, say UNR or Montana State. The school creates it, the school manages it, it goes straight to them. Okay, oftentimes school-specific ones can be easy, especially if you're like, I'm going to apply to CSUs, UCs, and UNR. Okay, sometimes they have different options to apply. You can apply Common App or straight to the school. If you have more than one that's on the Common App, it's usually easier to do that. But if you're just doing one, like private institution or something like that, sometimes it can actually be easier and potentially cheaper to do the school-specific application, and they're considered equally. Okay. Universal application, generally we don't have anybody do that one, but it's up there. The Common Black application is, we have a few students do that every once in a while, but it's available. Priority applications are sometimes the ones you might see, for example, in those emails. And sometimes that might be the benefit. They might say, here's a priority application, we're going to waive your application fee. Okay? Again, it doesn't mean you should apply just because it's free. But it might be a way that you can like save a little money if they did kind of cherry pick you and said, here, we want you to apply to our school. Fast applications, you don't see as much of those anymore. And our CSU Mentor and our UC application. Okay? The biggest ones that we have, Common application and these two, followed up by the school-specific application. Okay? We're going to spend time talking about the big three, Common App, CSU, and UC. Okay? Because everyone else, all these other ones are not, like, every school's going to look a little different. Different places to go, different process. So UCs. The application actually is open to hit submit and pay your money in the month of November. However, the application to start filling out and working on is actually already open. It's been open since August 1st. Okay? So students can get on, create the application, work through the process. They can actually get all the way through to the last page where you have to submit and enter your credit card information before, today, if they really wanted to. But they can't actually log in and submit until November 1st hits. The next question I always get is it better to submit on November 1st? No. Okay? It does not matter when you submit your application in this application itself. Okay? They are considered equally here or there. Okay? And I would argue this is not good, and that's generally not good either. The reason being, that when you're pushing the deadline, you might screw that one up. November 1st, you got time. Look it over one more time. Give yourself a week or two to kind of sit, take your eyes off the screen, then come back and look it over one more time before you hit that submit. It is your one chance. There are no take-backs. You submit, you read through your summary, you're like, oh no, I misspelled my name. It happens. Number 7 in the name, I've seen it before. That is not fixable. So they're going to review it like it is. Okay? So it's your one shot, you better make sure it's right. Okay, so I suggest with our CSU and UC apps, which are all due November 30th, I suggest setting a goal of getting them submitted before we leave for Thanksgiving break. That gives you plenty of time. Again, if you go after that, that's fine too. But it's just a good target. Okay? Does a couple things. You're safe. Okay, you're not going to do it against the deadline. It still gives you plenty of time to review things, to let people look at it. Okay? No one here is generally going to look at your stuff over Thanksgiving break anyways. Okay, so it's kind of a nice time frame. Plus, you can actually enjoy turkey. You can sit down and have an actual vacation once it's submitted. Okay, so that's kind of a good target place that would add on your calendar. Again, it's not hard. You can err on one side or the other, but it's a good kind of area to shoot for.
I feel like I should have answered this, but do college applications require you to submit your transcripts along with the application?
It's actually a good question. The answer is sometimes. You'll find that's the answer of a lot of things. That's a very kind of generalized question. So the UC applications, no. So you will be filling in. You will need a copy of your transcript, which all seniors and juniors will be looking at in your Pathways class next week. You'll be checking all of your graduation and interview requirements. So make sure you check those things very carefully. You'll also be looking for outside credits in your Pathways classes. What is on your transcript is what is there, so if you're missing something, you need to let us know. I've looked at them several times, but I don't know if you've taken an online class or something else that we're missing that we don't have. Generally, CSU UCs, they're not going to want your transcripts until the very, very end of the process. We're starting to see some schools asking for transcripts in the spring. We're generally going to tell us we don't want them until after graduation. Okay, they're doing what's called a self-reporting institution, both CSUs and UCs. Meaning, when you fill out the application, you're going to put in all of your A through G classes, all your grades. Okay, this is again where you're double checking, because if you're wrong, they're going to catch it. Okay, but you don't have to prove it until the end. Okay, you can put in all A's, but if you don't have all A's, and you get admitted, and then in June after you graduate, you send in your transcript, and they say, wait a second. You don't have a 4.0, you have a 3.0. We admitted you with a 4.0, they may change their mind. So every admissions is called the conditional admissions. So they can actually do what's rare, so I don't want to freak you out, but it has happened. They can rescind admissions, and that's where senioritis comes in. Okay? Again, they want to see people performing at a similar or better level than they have in the past. Okay? There are 0 paper apps. Everything is online. I would start exploring the UC website. There's a lot of good information. They talk about personal insight questions, which is their versions of an essay. Okay? There are fee waivers, which you will actually plug for both CSU and UC. They have an income kind of based on your family. It's a calculation. So basically, they're going to ask you how many people are in your household, what's your income. You're either going to qualify for fee waivers or not. Okay, the hard part is you won't really know until after you do that. And that's at the end of the application. Okay. If you qualify, you get 4 for free. If you don't, it's $70 per application or per campus. Okay. So if you apply to 8 all the UCs, you're going to pay $70 a pop. So it can get a little pricey. Test scores are another thing that's oftentimes part of this process. There are test optional schools out there, but CSUs and UCs will all require testing, ACT or SAT. Some schools or programs might highly recommend subject tests, so you want to explore some of that too. Once you get your list of schools, because that would be something you would need to tackle typically very early in this fall. With UCs, you can order 1 test score to a single campus, pick one school that you're applying to, and all of them share. So you don't need, if you apply to 7 schools, you don't need to order 7 tests because it's like 11 or 14 bucks a pop. So I don't show this to be scary, but I show it to be realistic. Okay. This is actually a year old. I didn't have quite the amount of time I expected to update with numbers from this year, but they actually improved slightly. By slightly, I mean like a couple dozen students, but they're relatively similar. Okay, so if you look down here, you can see when you're applying to different campuses, you're applying up against 100,000, 115,000 other students. Okay? Some of these students are probably like, they'll look at it just like any job application and be like, yeah, you don't really qualify, and so unfortunately we can't admit you. Pretty quick decisions. Other ones might be pretty quick decisions on the admit side, but most of them are going to have to go through some deliberation. Okay? Your admissions percentages are over here. Okay? So for the vast majority of schools, students that apply broadly can get into a UC if that's what you desire. Okay? It might not be the UC of your choice potentially, but if you're looking for a UC education, that's what you can do. Who can tell me a little bit, what do you think the biggest difference between CSUs and UCs are, other than the name? Money, it's more expensive.
You need an essay.
Yeah, the application process is different. So one of the biggest things that I tell people when they ask, like, so what is the difference, is more about some of their focus. Okay, UCs are generally bigger. It's usually why there's a lot less of them. Okay, sometimes that you will see that some of them will have higher, will lower admissions rates, but they also have some differences in terms of their goals for educating students. Okay, the UC system is pretty well known for their research. A lot of their programs are highly research-based, okay? But what that means is you're going to be doing a lot of potentially theoretical, potentially kind of like sit and think versus get up and do, okay? You will have all of those things, and you will have research stay at a CSU, but CSUs, on the other hand, are more typically a little bit more hands-on, which is what you'll see. The UCs, you'll generally have some larger classes. You'll see bigger class sizes, 300 or 400 student classes potentially, and you'll also see a lot less of your professor generally. Okay, usually, especially in the first year or two of college. Okay, usually as students get into the upper levels, they might see more of that professor because the professor's job is actually to do research. That's why they're hired by the UCs generally. So they'll have teacher's assistants, laboratory assistants, or research assistants that will generally teach some of their undergraduate level work. Okay, the CSUs, you'll see some of that, but you will tend to see your professors within class quite more often. Okay, so those are some of the biggest differences. So like I said, you have to think about what your goals are when you're applying to school. So like, if you know yourself and you're like, you know what? When so-and-so teacher sits up in the front, or Mr. Ream stands up in the front of the room and drones on for 2 hours, I kind of fall asleep. You might want to consider that when you're thinking about schools that might fit your needs. Again, it's not just about the program, it's about you as a learner. Okay, so considering all those things are going to be good things. And that's actually a pretty good question to ask people. If you come to a rep, say, hey, you know what? I am a hands-on learner. Talk to me about how you guys utilize that in some of your classes. I don't find myself functioning super well potentially in a class of 500 people. Like I really like that teacher interaction or professor interaction. Can you talk to me about your class sizes? Those are all excellent questions. I can guarantee you that the college reps are dying to answer some of those questions, not like just like, hey, do you got a sticker? Or like, what's your mascot? Like, that's the kind of question they usually get. Okay, so they want to answer some of those really deep questions. So those are great ones to ask. Any questions about this slide? Yeah.
So, do you know exactly what colleges are going to be visiting this school? Like, what reps are going to come?
Up until like the next week or two. They're all on the calendar. They're also on Naviance, so that's where Naviance also comes into play. So schools will ask to come. They'll either come to lunch, and we've also added the college career class during 6th period, which some schools will be pushing into, and that's something that if you see a rep on the calendar or on the announcements or something like that, that they're going to be here that week, that they're going to be here during 6th period. If you don't have a 6th period, swing on in. If you do, come talk to me ahead of time, and we can likely work it out. It slightly depends on your class and your teacher what they're doing. There's a good chance we can work out a slip that you can come and listen. Okay, but up until a certain point, yes, but they request, so they don't like book it like in March or something like that. There's a few people that are coming so far. So if you check the calendar. Okay, eligibility, meaning who can apply. Okay, so they're considering your A through G coursework. And that's their primary focus. Those are the courses that we go through the submission process every year. And they say this is a quality course that meets our expectations of a college prep class. Okay, your GPA, and that's important, that's as calculated by the UCs. They do a couple different variations of GPA. So what's on your transcript might look slightly different than what they see. Okay, because you're going to actually enter all your grades, it's going to recalculate. Okay, so don't be surprised when you're up there, you're like, this doesn't match. It probably won't. The closest approximation is probably that 10 through 12 academic GPA that you'll see on your transcript. Okay. Honors and AP credit does vary by campus. Okay, so what they, for example, if you scored a certain amount on an AP exam, it might vary by campus. Okay, when you actually get there, but generally AP scores are relatively not important to the admissions process and more important to the placement. The AP course is more what they're looking at. Okay, so that with that. Again, we talked about subject tests. You'll need to research that. Generally, you'll see them for some more competitive majors. It's very rare to see a school-wide requirement. And usually you will see the word recommended. What do you think the word recommended really means? Required. Just change it, okay? Because that's really what it is. Okay, they do consider other factors. So they will look at community service, what leadership you've had, sports, other things that you've done, extracurriculars. So you will want to have a list of those things. Okay, they're going to ask what you've done, how long you've done it, and a very, very short piece of information about why. And then those personal insight questions. And how they review? They review on what's called comprehensive review at the UC system. Meaning, they're going to look at all these different areas. Each campus is going to set what their priorities are. I mean, they're going to kind of rank these things by what's most important. Generally, you'll kind of see them kind of go like this. This is usually kind of like up towards the top, but it can be flipped over. Okay? The academic senate for every UC actually gets together every summer and says, here's what's most important to us as professors in the classroom. So they're going to seek that stuff out. Okay? So all these things are kind of on the table for consideration. The personal insight questions, you got 8 questions to choose from, you're going to pick 4 of them. When you're writing, when you're given an option of saying like, hey, you have this many and you need to write this many, one of my biggest suggestions, and where I see people kind of take their essays into the next level, is by not just writing the minimum amount. Okay, if they're going to say you can write 4 of the 8 questions, and they only write 4. They pick their top 4, and they only write 4 of them. Okay? When I tell them, hey, push yourself, write 5 or 6, it's usually not the first 4 that they pick to submit. It's usually the 5th or 6th one. Okay? And then you have some options, and you can kind of like play with how do you want to message and package yourself in your application. Okay, they're short. Okay, and there are no preference in terms of which response you choose. Okay, they're all equally considered. It's more about, again, what do you want the colleges to know about you? For this is your one chance to show the UCs who you are off of a piece of paper. Okay, so you look at this as a key opportunity. For like Common App, when you're writing essays or recommendations, that adds another flavor. If the school has an interview, okay, that brings life to your application. The people who read them take a very deep look at those things. It tells you a lot about that person. You can find all this information. It's really small. It's going to take us too long to read through them. To give you an example, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. All of them are very, very, very broad. You can probably apply that to many different scenarios. Okay? But please be honest and true to yourself. Like when you're writing these things, don't make something up. Like don't embellish. Okay? Are they going to fact check you? Most likely not. Okay, but they read thousands of these a year. They get very good at reading between the lines. Okay? So check out, if you Google UC personal insight question, you'll come up with a whole list, or you can create your application and check it out. Okay, but I would encourage looking at those now. This is a good thing to start practicing, start thinking about. Okay, you don't have to start your application to start thinking about some of your writing. Okay. Some resources when you come up against some application questions, because there's always application questions, and the problem is they usually end up on the last day or two, and everyone has a million questions, and there's only so many hours in a day. Okay, so the first one, they spend a lot of time creating these applications and also helps and FAQs and all these other things. Read the instructions, because most of the time it's like, hey, let's sit down and look this up. Okay, please enter your A through G classes. Okay, you're asking what classes you should enter. A through G classes. So please read them and then read them again. They have help videos, help questions. They also have an admissions department you can actually pick up the phone and talk to. Okay? And sometimes that is my answer. Sometimes I know the answer. Okay, but sometimes I will say, you know what? I can't really figure it out either. This is a new one for me. We need to actually call someone, and I'd rather do that. It might take you a little bit of time, but do that and you will get the right answer. Okay? I'm happy to review, again, both essays as well as applications. Again, just please set up an appointment to do that with me. Most of them, like essays, generally share them on Google Drive. That's what most people do. Applications, though, you'll need to bring a computer in with you and we pull it up on your computer, we review it. Okay? We'll be setting up, like I said, I don't have them calendared yet, but we'll have some RTI in the next month or two, different RTI sessions that we'll kind of just have. And really what it is kind of a structured work section for the most part. Things like essay writing, stuff like that, I might have more of kind of a more presentation type where you get some information. But like CSU's, UC's, it's more of just hey, we're gonna have this space, come in and work, and when you get stuck, then we can help you. Versus kind of here's what the UC application, because everyone works through at a different pace. Okay? We do not report class rank, so that's a very common question that we get. It's a little less common now that it's been a couple years that we've done that. But when you see that on an application, it does not exist. And then UC apps and CSU apps do not want your non-A through G courses. And this is the biggest one. I always see PE. We love our PE. We love PE teachers, but it's not an A through G approved course, and it does not belong in your application. Okay? So if you're curious about what our A through G classes is, you can come ask. We have posters around, and literally on the applications, you type in the name of the class, and it will pull down and show you your options of A through G classes. Okay? Generally, if you have to type in a class, it probably shouldn't be on there. Okay? Or you're looking a little bit more. You need to be more creative with what you're calling the class. Okay?
So should we do just the required A through G classes, or if we
Add
do
all of them.
2 physical sciences
Yep.
for both of them?
Add those. Good. So the required one is going to say, if you just fill in the required, you have the now privilege of submitting your application. They're not going to say you do not qualify, but you probably won't get in. Okay? You need to put in all those other ones that is what they're really looking for. Okay? The others are your college preparatory electives, and that's really what they want to see. Your application should match exactly what's on your transcript. Okay, so that's important. CSUs. Similar time frame, with the exception that it's not open until October 1st, so you can't actually log in until October 1st, whereas UC's it's August 1st. But you can submit within any of those dates in that window. Okay, so if you wanted to bust through and get done in one day, you technically could. Not advisable, but it's available. Again, online, no paper applications, csumentor.edu. One application, again, both CSUs and UCs have a common application, little c, little a. They are not the formal organization Common App, okay, but they are a common application in the sense that you can apply to multiple campuses by filling out one application. Okay, so this UC application, you're not going to fill out multiple applications for UCs. It's going to be one, and there will be a few different pages that you'll add depending on the UC that you're applying to. Okay. Similar with the CSU Mentor, you're going to fill out one application, and generally you're going to fill it out and submit it to a single school. You'll go back at another school, and it's all pretty much essentially all the way filled out, with the exception of generally majors and a few other small details that you got to add to that particular second school. Okay. A lot of people will start multiple applications for CSUs, and it starts to get a little confusing in my opinion. I suggest getting all the way through with one of them. They all have the same deadline. Okay, getting through all of one application, getting it submitted, and then going back and then creating the next one, because it pre-populates everything. If you have a couple different ones open, it can start getting a little dicey. They did have a few issues with your application last year. We're hoping that that's not the case. If it is, we'll try to keep you aware of what those might be. They had some issues with some of their classes that they were adding, and so there's a few confusing pieces. So if you ever run into glitches or issues or like, it didn't save, okay, like those things are things come ask. There might be a solution. They might have a backup or something like that, but generally use good technology etiquette. Don't leave your web page open for like 3 hours and expect it to still be there, okay? Get to a stopping point. There's usually a save button. Many of the more common ones will actually save as you enter things, but that's not always the case, like Google Drive does. Like when people have those programs that don't automatically do that and they close it, they freak out because they're not used to it anymore. But just know that you can lose these things. The last thing is most campuses are actually what's called impacted. Okay? The CSU system is designed to serve California students, and so different campuses and programs are impacted, meaning they're actually actively trying to not enroll as many students. Okay, so they're actually trying to reduce the enrollment. They're still taking students, but not at the same rate that they have in the past. Okay, and so for example, they have campus-wide impactions. So for example, at Cal Poly SLO is a campus-wide impacted school almost every single year. They also have impacted programs within impacted campuses, meaning like and basically what that does is it changes this number, the eligibility index. And this is the hard part about the CSU application. You become a number. Okay? There are no writing components to the CSU, which is partly why it's one of the easier ones. No essays, no interviews, pretty much nothing that makes you a person, sadly. You are a transcript and a test score in your classes. Okay, and that's the hard part, but it's also somewhat of the easy part too on the other side of the flip. Yeah.
Which majors or programs tend to be more heavily impacted?
So it's going to be your more common, like popular ones. So you're going to have engineering, you're going to have nursing, some of the like pre-professional programs sometimes. If you looked up CSU impaction, they actually will list which programs are impacted. So they'll tell you which college programs and which campuses. And basically what it does, you're admitted on what's called the eligibility index, and that's a number. And that's where you kind of get, it kind of makes me sick inside a little bit because it's like there's so much more than just those numbers, but to them there's not. But basically, it's your high school GPA, again, as recalculated by them, times a coefficient, plus your SAT score without writing, and that's your eligibility index, or similar type of equation with the ACT score. Again, SAT, ACT are interchangeable, they can use both. Most minimum eligibility indexes is 2,900. Okay, you don't necessarily have to go out and like calculate your number. There's a calculator if you're curious, but most people, if you have a 2.0 or higher and a decent SAT score, you probably can meet this number. Okay, the thing that Impaction does is it raises that eligibility index. Okay, so when you're applying to an impacted program, your eligibility index is going to have to be higher, which then means one of these coefficients, or both of them, will need to be higher to get you in. Okay? They do not necessarily publish what that is. About 3 weeks from now, I'll be going to Sonoma to go to a CSU conference, so I might have a little bit more information at that point with updates that they give us. But again, generally, even if you kind of had an idea, there's always a gray area, but it's sometimes a nicer thing to know kind of what your target may potentially look like. Okay? So that's tough for the CSUs, but there's no recommendations, no essay, personal statement. There's also no recommendations for the UCs. It's just that one, those 4 personal insight questions that you're answering. So your most competitive schools, again, meaning the more difficult ones to get into, Cal Poly SLO, Pomona is actually coming up there too, Long Beach and San Diego State. Okay? Some of your least competitive schools in terms of admissions, and again, competitiveness does not equal quality of education. Okay, that's an important distinction. Sonoma State, that's actually probably one of our top schools that we now send students to. Okay, Sonoma State. Students really like it from here. Humboldt, Stanislaus, Chico, these are 2 really big ones that have grown for our student population in the last probably 2-3 years. And San Bernardino, 78%. Chances are pretty good you'll be admitted to one of those institutions. Okay. We're going to skip through a few of these things. With all applications, but especially with these, because you're only a number, there's not a lot of room for error in this. Please do not I get people tell me like, I just remembered my classes. Remembered what I started. It's like, don't do that, please. Literally have a piece of paper in front of you with your transcript. Take one home that you get on Thursday next week, or Wednesday or Thursday next week. Have it with you as you are filling this out, and it should be line for line, grade for grade, exactly the same. Okay? Similar when you're signing for SATs, you should always also use your full legal name, as it's on your passport, legal documentation, things like that. Okay? It's got to match it. When it doesn't, it causes problems and issues. These are computers that many times make these connections, and if there's a hyphen and there's no hyphen, they're going to think there's two different people with similar names living at the same address. Okay, and that causes a lot of headaches on your part. The other piece about college is they do not want to hear from me, and they do not want to hear from you, the parents, when issues arise. You parents might be, whew, sometimes I am too, but it's a lot harder for the students to pick up the phone. It surprises me too, like sometimes it's tough to talk on the phone as a teenager. There's not necessarily texting to the admissions officer. Sometimes I'll have a chat, which is nice. But like sometimes you sit on the phone and you also sit on hold. Especially in busy seasons, it's not uncommon to sit on hold for over an hour. Okay, so plan ahead. This is why checking and double checking and trying to use other resources is helpful if you're looking for an answer to a question. Private colleges. Deadlines vary quite a bit in the world of private college. Okay? They can have very early deadlines depending on your application type, or very late deadlines. Okay? It's not uncommon for some schools to take applications up through March or April. Okay? And so those are big things. Letters of recommendations are typically needed, especially if you're on the Common App. Usually one from me, and 1 to 2 teachers is not uncommon. When you add schools on the Common App, it'll tell you specifically what is required and what is optional. That optional is one area that I say don't equate to required. Okay? Recommended is, optional is kind of more up to you. All right? And so you can choose. Do not add letters of recommendation just because they gave you space to. They can actually water down some of the information that you're sending along if you're just adding kind of fluff. Okay, it's better to be a strong, short one that you know is going to be a positive application than add something because you have the ability to. With these guys, so those first 2 CSUs, UCs, they don't see, like I said, their self-report. They don't see your transcript before you typically have paid all your money and bought the sweatshirt. These guys will. So private schools, especially, again, Common App, we actually, right after we send, and having snow days actually really screws us a little bit in this area, we actually send what's called a mid-year report. So we send an initial report with your transcript. We actually send what's called a mid-year report, which has your first semester grades and potentially any changes. So here's the scenario. Send your, you apply, I write you a glowing letter of recommendation, send your transcript along, and everything's great. That's your initial report. You come and tag my car, pump my tires or something. You think oh, he's already sent my stuff, I'm good to go. I have the opportunity to resend that letter of recommendation, or anybody, and they ask us to. We generally don't report as policy, but it depends highly on the situation. For things like disciplinary records, a serious disciplinary incident can be reported, and it's generally considered our ethical responsibility to do so, as well as any misdemeanors or felonies. Okay, so if we are aware of those things, we are ethically responsible for reporting those things. So those do go mid-year, and then you have a final report with your final report, and all those things can be included there as well. Okay, so that's kind of the reporting timeline. When you're asking for information, whether it's transcripts, letters of recommendation, or anything like that, again, we ask for 2 weeks. If you ask shorter, I'm going to say I'll do my best, but if you come to me an hour before a deadline, the likelihood of things getting in is probably pretty small. Okay, so that's where your responsibility as a student kind of comes into play, and you need to kind of be on top of your timeline and give your teachers, especially, plenty of time to complete their things. Because I work in an office, I can shut my door, I can change things around. Your teachers sit in the classroom, will stand and do all kinds of other things in the classroom and teach all day. Okay, so they don't have the same amount of time and flexibility as I do. So the 2 weeks is really especially important for them.
Jeff?
Yeah.
On the recommendations, I know when you said a counselor recommendation, is that you? What about Laura Delory for the kids that are doing the independent study? Where does she come in? Would she be
She's a teacher.
Okay, she's a teacher.
Yeah. So it kind of depends on relationship as well. So people can generally carry multiple hats potentially. So if I was a coach, I could be, it depends on how you're also writing that recommendation.
Okay.
So if I'm writing it from the counselor hat, it's gonna go in a certain like pot. If I don't really know you as a counselor, but I know you as a coach, it's gonna not be necessarily from an educator perspective. It's more about the content of the letter. So am I speaking on your behalf from my experience with you in the classroom or on the sports field potentially? So Laura would be an educator typically, so be a teacher, so we can speak to that. I would say more so if she had you in like AP Bio or something like that, but she knows you as a student. Yeah.
Can you, back on the other page, refer back to the early decision and explain those?
Yep, that's what that slide is.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So yeah, jumping ahead, but we're right there. So this is a confusing part, so we're gonna spend a small amount of time on this, and it's actually very important. Okay, so I apologize if I try to get it right, but it's gonna be a little bit hard to follow, because there's different ways to apply to college, so I'm gonna do my very best. They're separated into two different areas, okay? On this side of this black line, there's what's called non-restrictive application types, okay? And on this side, you have restrictive application plans, okay? So those are the two main, if we were to classify applications, that's the two types, restrictive or non-restrictive, okay? Underneath each of those, there are some different options, and this is somewhere where it gets a little confusing for you guys. There might be multiple options available at different schools. So one school might have all of these options available for you. I would say that's rare. It's less rare to have this one, this one, this one, that you have to choose, and many times choose ahead of time. Okay, so let me kind of explain what each of them are. Regular decision, that's typically the easiest one because that's the system that most people are most familiar with. You have a starting deadline, sometime in the fall, you know, that you can start applying, you have a deadline to submit your application, and then it closes. Everyone submits in that window. Then they do a whole bunch of work in between, and then sometime later in the spring, they come out and say, you got it and you didn't. Regular decision. Okay, kind of the standard application timeline and process. It's a non-binding commitment. You can apply to as many schools as you'd like. You can withdraw your application. There's no penalty if you do that. Pretty basic stuff. The next one is generally you won't see this one in the mix of all of these. It's this one usually stands on its own. It's called rolling admissions. UNR, Montana State are great examples again of a rolling admissions school. And what that means, generally rolling admissions schools are going to be not quite as low of admissions percentage, so they're generally a much higher admissions, like more students will get in. 75% or above of students will probably get into a rolling admissions school. And what that does is they don't have to be quite as super detail oriented on their application review. Okay, they're gonna see if students are qualified and maybe qualify for programs, but generally they're pretty wide open for students to apply to. So what they do is you can apply. They'll have basically a start date and an end date. They may have a priority date. Okay, but it's usually a very large window. Might be November 1st to March 1st. Okay, with a priority deadline of December 1st, meaning like if you submit before December 1st, you might be qualified for this scholarship, or they might consider you a little bit more fondly. But the nice thing about that is they will tell you a result like a week to 2 weeks later. So they process your application as it comes in. Okay, so they're not waiting for the whole pool of applications to compare. Really what they're doing, they're evaluating you. Are you a quality applicant for our school? Yes or no? Not are you compared to all these other kids? Okay, and so that's a nice one sometimes because it's a great safety option potentially. Like you have a decision on your back, maybe in the first week or two of your application timeline. Okay, if that school is in interest for you. Okay, so that's rolling admission. Early action, so usually you'll see these acronyms. So EA, early action. Okay, that's again a non-binding, like you're not signing your life away, agreement. What that means typically is students will apply much earlier in the year. So say they'll have a regular decision deadline of November 30th. and an early action deadline of November 1st. So basically, are you prepared to submit earlier? If so, we might be able to tell you your result earlier. Okay? So really all it does is change your timeline. There's a kind of a common misconception that this equals more chance to get in. Generally, that is not true. Okay? And the reason being there's not an admissions benefit on the side of the admissions team to early action. Other than they can kind of start their applications early, but what they're looking for is that yield. Remember, they want to see who's actually going to come. Okay, so it helps their time frame a little bit, but I would say at almost every institution you're not going to get like an admissions benefit from applying early. The benefit is more on your behalf as a student, knowing things earlier in the year, and maybe getting things done earlier if you wanted to.
How does early action combine with the FAFSA? Because when you get your acceptance letter, they usually tell you the money you're gonna receive too, right?
Typically
So-
very quickly.
So if you fill out the FAFSA and you're getting early action, I'm just wondering, how do those coordinate? So,
That one really doesn't have any impact. These guys don't generally have any impact with FAFSA. This one, let me talk about this one because this one will.
okay,
Okay? So ED or early decision is the other big one that you'll commonly see. How many of you guys heard of early decision? Okay? Early decision is part of the restrictive application plans. This one is a little less common. You'll see it at like Stanford and a few other places. So kind of similar, but I'll show you the differences. Early decision is the most common one, so we'll talk about that one primarily. What that means is similar to early action in the sense that you're applying, say, in a similar early time frame. The main difference is this is now what's called a binding application. And by binding, I mean you are going to read 5 pages of legalese, you are going to sign it, your student is going to sign it, I am going to sign it. Being clear that you have been informed of all of your responsibilities and requirements by applying to the school early decision. So what that means though, so you submit early decision, what they tell you, what that means, kind of bubbling all that legalese down, is you have one school that you can apply to early decision. Okay, so you cannot apply anywhere else early decision. What you're saying is, you are my favorite, my best choice. If you let me in, I'm going nowhere else. What they're also saying is, if you let me in, I can pay for it. What you're also saying is, if I don't follow through on my agreement, you have the legal ability to come after me for tuition. Okay, and that's what we sign on the dotted line for. Not my tuition. I'm just saying that we had the conversation that, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Okay, so it's got to be a pretty sure bet. But this is the one that has, this is the one that has an admissions benefit to it. The reason being, the admissions team, again, they're looking for yield. Who's actually going to place a deposit and come on the first day? Early decision guarantees a spot. Okay, they can count on 1,000 of their 2,000 students potentially. It's usually not that many. You know, a percentage of their student population is already on board more commonly before even the rest of the applications are in. So they know a portion of their yield. Helps them get closer to that magic number. Okay, again, it's all about stats and numbers. So that's why it gives you that. So they're going to look a little more fondly on people who submit early decision. Because they can say, you know what? We know the student really wants to come here. So we can put our money on the student. Even though they might not be quite where we want. Or they might not be as competitive maybe as this regular decision back within. Okay? And that's the big deal. Restrictive early action, I'm going to come back to this in a second, but restrictive early action is fairly similar, typically in the sense that it's non-binding. Okay? They won't necessarily make you sign the dotted line, we're going to come back to your tuition. You can actually back out, but what is restrictive about it is they're only going to let you apply to one school early action or early decision. So for example, if you apply early to Stanford, you can't apply earlier anywhere else. You have to read that fine print, but they won't necessarily say if we admit you, you're coming here for sure. So that's the big difference there. Okay, so there's the one option is that binding option. And if you do that, we will have a sit down. I will make you come in with your parent. We will have a conversation. You will explain to me why that's your best option. And then we will sign the form. Okay? It's that big of a deal. But it is an option. Okay? The financial piece is one to consider as well when you're looking at early decision. Okay? What you're saying, again, is you're going to go there whether or not you think you can afford it. You still can apply for financial aid, but you will not see your financial aid package typically before you find out your admissions decision. Okay, so you're kind of going into that process a little bit financially blind. Now, the next question is usually, well, what if they charge me $60,000 and they give me $5,000 of financial aid? It can and has happened. Okay. Generally, I will speak in generalities, and I'm being recorded, so if this ever ends up in court, I have evidence. Generally, they will potentially let you out of a large gap like that. Okay, if they're going to say, you know what, you're $40,000 a year short, you can petition to potentially be let out of that binding agreement in that circumstance. But you've got to have a good reason, you got to be able to document it, and it's not a guarantee. If it's like a $5,000, $10,000 even difference, you might not, it's not that easy. It's got to be a pretty dang big chunk of change. Okay, so that's a big thing that you have to look at financially, some of the impacts of early decision. Okay, so that's a big conversation, and if you're thinking about it, again, it's got its benefits, it's also got its cons and risks. Okay, there's always questions about early decision. Did I do okay explaining that? Good. It's like the first time there's been oh, darn it. Yes.
So, of the state colleges, universities, do most of them have that early decision? No.
No.
Only a few.
And when are most of the deadlines for early decision?
It varies. You'll see no earlier than October 1st. But October 15th, November 1st is oftentimes not an uncommon date. November 1st, I would say, is probably most common. November 15th is another common one. About every 15 days, depending on.
Could you get a priority appointment with you if you are considering early decision? 'Cause
My calendar is wide open.
okay.
Yep. Yeah, I try to do what I can. Any questions on this page before we go forward? We're almost done, don't worry. Okay. Common App, again, one website. You're going to apply to 871 different schools. Again, if you're applying to multiple schools that are on the Common App, it usually saves you time and energy to do it that way. Okay. The exceptions might be, if you're like a top recruit, the school might want you to do like, say, an individual application for some reason, or if they're considering something, you're having conversations with them, they may ask you for certain reasons, but usually it saves you time and energy. It's also available internationally, so if you're looking internationally, there might be options that you might find on Common App there too. The last thing on there too is, so you'll have comment on the Common App. Apart from like recommendations, there's also writing components. Okay, so there are general common application essays that you will select several prompts from. A little bit longer form essay than a personal insight question. Okay, they will spell out kind of how many words they're looking for. I would explore those common ones. If you Googled common application essays, pop right up. Okay, but many schools have added what's called supplemental forms or supplemental writing supplements. Okay, where the school asks you for additional writing components. So you might, it's kind of the scary part if you don't add your colleges right away. You get all the way through the Common App, like, whew, I'm finished. And then you add the school, and you're like, I'm gonna go apply. You're like, 2,000 word essay. Oh man, like so. Add the schools early on in the process that you're planning on applying to, because you will find that it adds some additional timing that you need to plan for. More writing, maybe a resume, there might be a performance piece that you need depending on what your major or intended kind of program might be. Okay? And each one will be different. There's wacko, like Google type interview questions that they'll ask you. There's pretty common types of essays. The other piece about essays too that I'll just put in here is you gotta work smarter, not harder. Okay? Don't like cheesily recycle your essays when they don't fit, but you don't have to generally write an entire new essay if the topics are relatively similar. You will probably want to tweak it some, depending on the context and what you're writing for, but you don't have to necessarily find a whole new subject on a different application. The other piece about writing, and this is helpful early in the process, is you are not writing to a particular school in either of the common essays. Personal insight questions go to all of the schools you're applying to, so don't say, Berkeley's my number one choice, and then send it to UCLA. You will not get into UCLA. They're rivals. So the same thing happens on these common applications, the general applications themselves. The writing supplements that they add, the individual schools add, those go to that particular school, and you should for sure should explain why. And they usually ask you, that's probably one of the most common application or essay topics is, why do you want to come here? And that's again why I ask you that at our meeting. Why do you want to come here? If you have trouble answering that, should you really apply there? Like, that's my question. And so you should be able to answer that pretty well in an essay. We're going to skip some of this stuff to kind of, it's a little bit more thinking, but if you want to look through some of these questions on the slideshow that I'll send out later, you can. The big thing about finances, so kind of, again, we'll talk about the financial aspect on a shorter evening, but it takes another chunk of time, and it's completely different than this. But it is a consideration when you're looking at admissions information. You should be considering finances, okay, but it should not necessarily make or break where you decide right now, okay? To kind of put the financial aid process in a nutshell, right now you are shopping before you know what the price is. Okay, you're picking out what you want and not knowing how much it'll quite cost you. But you should at least know like the MSRP. Okay, you might not know if that's what the out-the-door cost is, but you should get an idea. Okay, usually it's much higher than what it actually is, but it can be very different. Okay, so each school, unless you're applying, generally every public school and most private schools now will have what's called a net cost price estimator. Okay, and what that does is it'll actually ask you like, okay, what's your income? How many people are in college? So general basic information. It doesn't keep it on their website or anything like that, but it'll spit out, hey, here's an estimate of maybe a financial aid package you could be eligible for. Okay, so it's kind of like previewing your taxes. It's like, how much might I owe? Okay, it's the same thing here. You want to know before you commit to anything. Okay. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Update. October 1st, not January 1st. It used to be January. Okay. It's October 1st, so strike that from the record. But make sure you complete that, and it's earlier so you can get your information back earlier. Okay? Usually a couple weeks to a month or two after you get an admissions decision, not after you generally submit your application. After you've been admitted, you will then get a financial aid package offer. Kind of depends on their timing, what it looks like. Okay? So that's a big thing. And if a school is not a financial feasibility, there's a lot of websites out there be like, call them up and negotiate, play hardball, like all this other stuff. They want you. They do that they offer you admission, but they're not going to like, oh yeah, sure, you called me, so here's another 10 grand. Like that's generally not the case. But they might be able to work with you in some areas. Okay, they might say, hey, you know, we're $3,000 short of making this a reality. And like, we're ready to place a deposit, but we just got to figure this out. They might not say, here's a bunch of free money, but they might say, hey, you know what, we might be able to package your loans differently or offer you some student aid work or something like that make that kind of a feasible option for you. Okay, so we'll go more in specific how the finances work, but you should know how much that is. Consider your loan options. Okay, that's a conversation to have early. A lot of students will say, I'm not taking out loans. And that's a great plan. Not a generally realistic plan for most people. Okay? It's all about being smart. And we'll talk about smart and kind of like how that works in that future night. The other piece about finances is that, remember, you are doing this 1 year at a time. So when they give you that net price, that is not net all 4 years. That is net 1 year. And college is not necessarily taking just 4 years right now. Okay? They can take 4.5 or 5 years, depending on the institution. And again, that comes into financial aid, which we'll break down, and I'll tell you about that 4-year graduation rate and why that's so important. They're not only getting out on time, it can actually make private schools cheaper than our public schools if you take longer than 4 years in certain circumstances. Okay, so that's a big deal. So let's talk about the end game and then we're done. So, deciding. In spring, after you weigh all these options together, okay, no school, again, high quality school, you know, not like a cheesy for-profit school that's going to rip you off. No school can require you to commit with the exception of an early decision applicant or an NCAA recruited athlete. They might have a different policy in place, but no other school can require a deposit or a decision prior to May 1st.
And does that matter what division it doesn't matter? I'm not looking at Division 3, Division 2.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
The deadline for deciding is May 1st. Okay, so they make it available to decide, but they can't say you have to submit your deposit and make a decision by April 1st. Okay, they give you a window of time. You have to generally submit. May 1st is the national candidates reply date. Okay, so that's the deadline you need to have your everything in, ready to go. Then you buy your sweatshirt. Okay? If you've received financial aid offers, you compare them carefully in this early time frame. This is when you do your shopping. Okay, your number one school may have admitted you, but it might be 3 times as much. Do you go with number 2? Okay, that's a decision for you as a family. I highly encourage attend prospective student events, many times in the spring and summertime. Sometimes before, but sometimes more in the summer, but it can help with this final decision-making process. If they offer something like April or like even early, like April or March, visit them, because you can see who you might be going to class with, or make friends of like people from the area. Have people that will go around and host events in that springtime. Talk to your family, ask questions. I'm available to help you kind of brainstorm and think about some things you might not be considering. It might be time for another visit. If you're weighing 2 options, I would say, a $500 flight might justify saving $10,000 of wasted tuition potentially. Okay, this is a big one. Okay, and I will be mad. Okay, and I generally don't get mad about a lot of things, but I'll be very disappointed if it happens. You should never submit an enrollment deposit to more than one school. Okay, it's called double depositing. Your deposit holds your seat. This is part of your agreement when you apply. Every school will say you may not deposit anywhere else. Okay? You have the entire month of May. People will be unethical and say, you know what, I'm gonna, maybe I have the money and I'm gonna submit 3 deposits for $500 each, and I'm gonna take another month to decide which school I'm gonna go to. Okay? Is it possible? It is. Is it right? Absolutely not. Okay? It is unethical. If colleges find out you're doing it, they will likely rescind your admissions. It's that important. The reason being, students who get denied are often placed on a wait list because they don't know if they have a seat. Once they get their deposits, they then determine how many people they can release off this wait list. If you deposit at multiple schools, you're then holding that seat, revoking people off that wait list. Okay? And schools take that very seriously, as do I. Okay? I can't kick you out of school, but I can shame if I need to. Okay? If you have decided, please notify other schools. Okay? Again, people are waiting to find out if they get in off this wait list potentially. Tell other schools that, hey, I've accepted a placement at such and such school. I appreciate the offer. You can go ahead and remove me from the candidacy because I've decided elsewhere. Okay? That helps them make decisions and can help other students like yourself if you're on the wait list, or other students in your class or around the country make decisions earlier. If you're on an offered spot in a wait lists are oftentimes a confusing and I think cruel and unusual punishment. You need to know what it means to be an active member of the wait list. Usually it's an active opt-in, but there might be other steps you have to accomplish. Okay, you might need to send an updated transcript or things like that to help continue that process. Okay? Do not take it if you don't intend to actually try to enroll there. But you should treat a wait list offer like a no. Okay, most people put a little bit too much hope in the wait list. Okay? Let me find, where is it? Here's an example of the wait list. Okay? Generally, wait lists are small, so a quarter is a very small number. It's not part of that 80,000 people. Okay? A couple hundred. 3,000 people at Davis entered the wait list, they let 50 off of it. Okay? 0 at UCLA, 8 out of 4,800 at UCSB, 200 out of 7,000 at Santa Cruz. So when I say treat wait list like a no, that's the reason why. You should deposit, you should plan on going elsewhere. Many times the wait list will happen and come back in May, late May or June. They may say, hey, you know what? We were able to get you off the wait list. Would you like to have a spot? And what happens is you would have already placed a deposit elsewhere. The unfortunate thing is you eat that deposit. You tell that school I've accepted a spot off the wait list. You place another deposit and now you're going to a different school if they offer that. But I encourage you, please do not wait and do not deposit elsewhere because you can lose that spot as well. The likelihood of getting off it is relatively small. Denials do happen. If you apply well, I would argue denials maybe should happen. Okay? If you're applying broadly, you might get denied. Okay? The goal is, if you've applied well, that you get admitted to more schools than you get denied to. Okay? But the grand fact of it is, all you need is one. Okay? If you make your list well, you might get bummed that maybe it wasn't your first choice, but if you make your list well, every school on that list is a top choice school that you will be happy going to. You might have a hierarchy, but you should be happy going to any school that's on your list, or else one of those schools that you're not happy attending should not be on your list. Okay? Because that's Murphy's Law. It happens. Everyone, it's heartbreaking, but it's true. Okay? Made it 5 minutes under. What questions do you have that you need me to answer? Yes? Go ahead. You can go. I'll get you blank in a second.
Okay, with SATs and ACTs, when's like the last sort of opportunity
Great
to
question.
get that in?
Last question, or the question was, when's the last time to get the SAT scores, or maybe the last SAT sitting you can do? Like every answer, it depends. But generally, most schools will take through about November, December. If you're applying earlier, like an early decision or early action, they will need it earlier. They won't take anything after you've generally submitted your application. Different campuses within CSUs and UCs will actually set certain deadlines as well. So that's part of the research, is when was the last SAT or ACT I may be able to submit. And just know that it might be different for different schools. Okay, so it doesn't mean you can't take the later one, it just might not qualify for that particular school. Another question that comes up for UCs and CSUs is, okay, it said that it'll take a December test date, but my application's due November 30th. How's that work? So that's the piece where you would register, you would enter that you're taking that exam in December, but you don't enter a score. You then send your score and they're updated. Hopefully that's not your first SAT, because that would be a scary thing. So you should know what you're walking into it with, and you're hoping you score better. If not, they're going to use your highest score. Don't like freak out about SAT scores. They see all of them, okay? But generally they don't look at all of them. Does that make sense? So they can see all of them. So when they send SAT scores, it goes into their massive computer system, into your profile. They can go in and look and see what all your scores were, but they do not have time to do that. It's going to spit out the information they want the most, which is your highest score. Okay, and that's the main thing they're going to look at. Okay? If you're hyper concerned about it, you can give College Board extra money to only send certain scores. But they're loaded already and they don't need it. Save your money, use it for something better. It's not worth it. Okay, so that's just a big piece, but yes, it depends on when that is. I suggest, to be safe, October is a pretty safe one to kind of like be happy, but if you really wanted to try again, like you might be able to get another one in. But I wouldn't bank on that score kind of being the one you were dead set on submitting. Like,
So I have a few. Do you know which UCs or CSUs, or if all of them superscore?
they don't. So they take a single sitting, all of them, CSUs, UCs, so they'll take a single test score. Common App schools are more often to super-score, but they, it's less, like it's more intermixed. Some schools will do what they want with it. They might consider both in the look. What super-score is, if you're not familiar with that, super-score will take test scores from, say, English and math and different dates and combine them together, instead of just your score over a single test sitting. Okay, so that's what that question is. Yeah.
With that, you said that the UCs don't super score. Do they take the most recent test day score or your highest test day?
They take your highest. They see them all, but they generally use their highest score. It could be your first, it could be your last. They might wonder a little bit about why you scored lower than the last one, but I mean, it's generally they want to know the best thing that they can use to admit you. If you showed them on an SAT, that's why they're statistically backed. One test date to another should be statistically similar. Okay, so they don't necessarily care how many times you took the test. What they care is what you can show us you can do. Okay, so they want to see your highest test score, which is why other schools can super score. Okay, they can look at 2 different test dates and take the highest score, but our state schools don't do that.
For letter of recommendations, does it have to be people in the school? Or if you did like an internship over the summer, you could get it from the...
Internships are great, and I would suggest considering that. Mine has to be for me. It's going to ask for 1 teacher. Okay, your teacher should likely be a classroom teacher. As much as and the internship would be a great one for the optional, extra one. Okay, but in the grand scheme of things, if they only say 1 counselor, 1 required, and no extras, they're going to look for a teacher one, not an internship supervisor, because they're not necessarily looking for an intern, they're looking for a student. So they want to see how you perform in a classroom, what your kind of like academic intelligence and creativity is, how you work with other people, okay, versus in a working environment. Because everyone knows high school students work harder when they work, right? They're getting a paycheck. That's how it works. I go to some of these restaurants and I'm like, who are you? Why don't you do this at school? It's amazing that happens when you give them a paycheck. But yeah, so it's a great, don't not do that. But just you have to be a little strategic about kind of what the colleges are wanting from you. Any other questions? I'm taking 2 more and then we're going to wrap it up and I'll stay up here for a few minutes and answer any individual
So if
ones.
you're thinking of going into a major that's impacted and you're strategically trying to get into the school, can you go in undeclared maybe and have a better chance than trying to apply to an impacted major?
Excellent question. Common answer, depends. Hypothetically, you can. Does it work for everyone? Definitely not. Let me give you an example. So, is anybody here a ag business major? Okay, good. I'm going to talk about ag business majors. So when I was at Cal Poly studying aerospace engineering, okay, the common avenue, if it was going to be tough for you to get into a major of your choice, say an engineering major or a science-based major, which were generally more impacted, was to apply as an ag business major. Generally a much easier pathway into the school. The problem is, Cal Poly very quickly, this was before my time, but they very quickly learned that that is what people are doing. And so they made it extremely difficult to actually change your major. Okay? Some schools are less concerned about that, but what I would say is generally you don't become much better of an applicant after year 1 or year 2 of college, which you typically do have to still apply and get admitted to a major even if you're admitted undeclared. Okay, so you have to perform at the college level, which is generally harder than most people think. I would suggest if you're pretty sure that you know that this is what I intend to major in, I would apply directly to that major. If they deny you, there's a decent chance they might still deny you in 2 years, and then you've taken 2 years of coursework at a school that you probably won't finish at. And it kind of makes things a lot more iffy. So, is it possible? Yes. Does it happen? Of course. Is it wise? You have to kind of judge that for yourself, and it might be a good question. Like Cal Poly, definitely not. I do not advise that. Okay, you should know, and you do have that. Cal Poly is one CSU that you do have to declare your major when you apply. You will not change it after you admit it. You get to choose it when you submit that application. Okay, most other places are a little bit more flexible, but that's a good question there. One more question, if there are any. Yes.
What is North Tahoe High's reputation among college admissions professionals?
We're really strong. So we have an abnormally high Berkeley admissions rate, believe it or not. Davis is a little harder for us for some reason year to year. But every year, and again, I'm not saying Berkeley, but because Berkeley is so low in the percentages, that's why it's kind of abnormally high. But we, every year we have 8 to 10 students out of a class of 70 to 80 be admitted, which is outside that kind of statistic. But generally we have really strong reputation. 80% of our students end up going to school. About 55-60% four-year college, 20 or so percent junior college. But yes, every student, I have not had a single student be denied to all their colleges, ever. So, don't be the one. So, thank you guys for paying attention. You guys, I'll stay around here for about 10 minutes if you guys have other questions. 2 hours is a long time to sit and listen, so I appreciate it. Let me shut this off and then, let me post the date for the financial aid workshop too.